At the start of the 80s, my band, the Chevrons, had lost our star female singer, our other female singer, and had all our guitars stolen, including my Gibson SG and Shergold Masquerader. This just left Gary on lead vocals and rhythm guitar, Brian on bass, Neil on drums and me. The first thing we did was to buy cheaper guitars and then recruit a stunningly glamorous singer called Maxine. We had a jerky post-punk sound that worked quite well with Maxine, though we probably wanted to be Blondie. We may even have eventually become better than our previous incarnation had we not inexplicably also recruited a sax player called Ralph. We assumed Ralph would get better, but we were wrong. I say inexplicably, but the word that really comes to mind is madness. And possibly Clarence Clemens. There was a lot of sax back then. Ironically, we went on to play better venues. We supported a heavy rock boogie band at the Music Machine. We were the headline act when a tour of unsigned bands played the Rock Garden, and we continued to be popular at the John Bull in Chiswick. We journeyed to Bishop Stortford to play with a prog rock band we had been friends with. We drove to the Kent coast, to the Isle of Sheppey, where we supported a band that were quite well known and went on to have success in the USA. But my memory of that day was of us trying to amuse ourselves in a depressing closed-down out-of-season seaside town. We also played an outside gig for Friends of the Earth, performing on top of some ruins. But my memory of that day was of trying to get lunch in a depressing provincial concrete shopping centre. When Brian left to get married, I think I took it as a sign that growing up was in some way now inevitable. We were joined by Ginge on bass. Like Ralph the sax player, he was in the RAF stationed at Northolt. Ginge managed to get us into the RAF camp regularly to rehearse in the stores he ran, and after the rehearsals we would drink in the naffy. We had a booking to hire our PA out to a band called the Mighty Stripes, and told to meet in Hyde Park. I took Ralph and Ginge to help. We found ourselves on a float going down Oxford Street. The two members of Her Majesty's forces who were with me were slightly concerned that we were heading a protest against the Nationalities Bill. They were even more worried when it turned out we had been seen on the Tea Time News. Only a small part of being in a band is about playing songs to audiences. It is about loading and unloading, driving for hours with just tapes of The Clash and The Doors, cutting out and sticking together cardboard pick sleeves for our single, while laughing at jokes no one else would get. It is about fixing an exhaust with coat hanger wire, mending guitar strings by winding the long bit onto the ball with pliers, and mending leads with soldering irons. It is about throwing your guitar in the air at the end of the set, having just spewed out fake blood, and then having to fix the electrics with gaffer tape, and wipe away the real blood left behind when you shredded your fingers on the strings, too pumped with adrenaline to notice. It is about taking your records to the record exchange to buy cassettes for demos, and then copying them and writing on the sleeves. It is about keeping a business-like operation on the road when you are in your early 20s, and some of your staff are still at school. It is about waiting for the AA, or waiting in A&E and then sleeping in the van. Ginge got us a gig in his hometown of Burnley. We got booked to do another gig lunchtime the following day. But Ginge got beaten up for having Cockney mates. So my memory of that weekend was the camaraderie of the late night wait in A&E. It is about getting in at 4 and leaving for work at 7, working temp jobs and sharing the kitchen porter duties with guys from other bands, or signing on, and sometimes straining the kindness of strangers to get a drink in the pub you are playing in. It is about parking next to an abandoned van, and when your mates are setting up the PA you are liberating the whole exhaust system. Or it is about starting out with a push because you've got no starter motor, and then parking on hills to get going again. It is about the arguments, the compromises, and the collaboration, where your idea for a song becomes real and people clap. It is about being in the race, being part of a scene, being listed in Melody Maker and NME, being booked to play at functions in hotels and marquees. We did a gig for Rock Against Racism in the hall above the Undertakers in Wealdstone. Every young man probably feels the primitive urge to be in a hunting party. I would never have got picked for a sports team, but I had been a patrol leader in the Scouts. The Chevrons was a hunting party, a hunt for fame and notoriety at the same time. I seemed to be in a constant state of fury, whilst also being the quiet one who only started playing to overcome his shyness and to get girls. But I never got girls, and I shied away at the end of the set, doing the takedown, or just sitting in the dressing room. I wrote a song about fighting our way through the hardships, hopefully to success. But one night in a prefab social club in Hillingdon, some skinheads heard it and started to follow us. They would come to our gigs and shout out for us to play that fighting song. This was not something we particularly wanted.
Got busted by the pigs when little Andy said he got put away. The common judge is innocent, don't they? And those guys stop us fighting, fighting. Those guys stop us fighting, fighting. Those guys stop us now till it reaches the top. And those guys stop us fighting, fighting. Those guys stop us fighting, fighting. Those guys stop us now till it reaches the top.
It did not end with a bang. There was no big decision, tearful last waltz, or protracted animosity. It no longer felt like the Chevrons. So towards the end we renamed ourselves the Wailing Pumas. I got a porter studio and a drum machine which were becoming a thing. I recorded demos with Gary and Denny, our old bass player, manager and driver, now playing keyboards. Neil the drummer joined a more successful band that had won the Melody Maker contest and was sponsored by a leisurewear company. Gary and I went to see him support Katrina and the Waves at the Marquee in Wardour Street. Gary and I helped build a 24-track studio in Walthamstow in exchange for being able to record a whole album's worth of songs. We were sort of intending to do something a bit Northern Soul.
Hold on, baby, you're moving much too fast. Hold on, baby, we got to make it last. Way too much time, so baby, hold on tight. We gotta make every moment count, yeah, we got to hold on to the night. We got to hold on to the night. Hold on, baby.
Our final attempt as a band had been called Gary South and the Prisoners of Rock and Roll. It was a bit Bruce, a bit Southside Johnny. We had horns. It was a bit Dexy's Midnight Runners, Oh Gino. We rehearsed the songs we were going to record in a rehearsal room in King's Cross, sounding a bit like this.
sweet love. Give me your sweet love.
But our urge to make a jangling sound won out, and on the recordings we called ourselves the Chevrons again. At the time I worked in the warehouse of a bedroom furniture company. A design fault in the wardrobe doors meant there were always broken mirrors, which would have ended up in a skip had I not, whilst fitting windows in the studio, learnt how to cut glass. I would regularly travel the North Circular with my pieces of broken mirror, and I would often stop and buy a cassette for the journey. I remember buying the Eurythmics album, the one with Here Comes the Rain Again, and I remember buying the latest Slade album. But then I gave in to an urge I had had since childhood, and I bought the cast recording of West Side Story. I was becoming more interested in working in the studio than playing live, and I did not want to keep writing jangly pop songs. I wanted to write a musical. During my day job to pass time, I would often flirt with the receptionist. I had no intention of pursuing a relationship with her, but one of the managers told me he thought her and I had something going, and that I should ask her out. He became quite insistent. He told me I should do it as soon as I could because you never know what will happen. On the Friday he called me into his office and told me I should really do it right away. He psyched me up and sent me away believing he must know something I did not. Maybe she had told him something. I asked her. She said no. I got called into the director's office and was given redundancy with 2 months' pay. I was due to go to the studio that night. Someone phoned to check I was coming. I told them what had happened and a night out on the town was planned. In the early hours of the morning I went to bed in the studio and stayed there for nearly a year.